Welcome back. We're on chapter 20. The chapter's called The Third Miracle, and we now know what happened in the first and second miracle. And we've also seen Matilda prepare herself and practice her powers with lifting a cigar in the previous chapter at home. And so we have an understanding that something exciting is going to happen, and we can pretty much expect this to be the climax of the book. The chapter opens with Miss Honey in her classroom, and it is Thursday, which is the day that Miss Trunchbull comes and takes over the class for a lesson to check on what the students have learned. Now, following the previous lesson where Miss Trunchbull abused a bunch of children, Miss Honey is checking in on each of the victims and making sure that they're all right, but she's also warning them to behave this time and to perform, to know their stuff. And this is where we're going to go to the book right now. I'm going to read you the passage that we're looking at. "And you, Nigel," Miss Honey said, "do please try not to be a smart aleck with the headmistress today. You were really quite cheeky to her last week." "I hate her," Nigel said. "Try not to make it so obvious," Miss Honey said. "It doesn't pay. She's a very strong woman. She has muscles like steel ropes." "I wish I was a grown-up," Nigel said. "I'd knock her flat." "I doubt you would," Miss Honey said. "No one has ever got the better of her yet." Let's take a look at the expressions over here. There's a couple of them which are interesting. One of them is how Miss Honey calls him a smart aleck. Smart aleck is someone who is irritating and who is a bit of a know-it-all. So one of the things that Miss Trunchbull hates is somebody who responds, who answers back. And so Miss Honey is warning him not to be a smart aleck. That means don't be a know-it-all, don't answer back, so that he avoids getting into trouble. The second one is how Nigel describes wanting to knock Miss Trunchbull, knock her flat. So to knock someone out flat is, it refers to boxing, really. It's when it's the final punch where basically your opponent is knocked out flat, and that's when you win. And so this is basically his reference. This is what he'd like to do to Miss Trunchbull, which is punch her basically until she's out flat on the ground. This little passage with Nigel's frustration is basically the author's way of encapsulating how most small children feel, most big children feel, and sometimes adults, but in this case, it's how small children feel that their lives are completely controlled by adults and they feel most powerless next to these adults. And of course, you also have adults who are exceedingly abusive, like Miss Trunchbull, which makes it even worse and far more unfair. So it is normal for children to feel powerless because that is the structure of our society. However, Nigel suggests that there is a remedy, which is essentially holding out, waiting till you've grown up and that you're physically able to knock those adults out and pay them back for this unfairness that they've been through. So this is his plan to get revenge on Mrs. Trunchbull and any other adults that have caused him any pain and anguish in his youth. This passage, however, has one clear message. Of course, it appeals to the younger readers who have felt, the fact that they are small and are in a world that is controlled by adults, which leaves them quite powerless. And when Matilda has her superpower and is able to flip this hierarchy and take control, that is obviously elating, and it's great. It's great fun for the younger readers who feel most satisfied at this upset. There is a message for older readers as well, which is very important. That is what Nigel says, that children who have been treated unjustly in their youth when they were small by adults who have bullied them may very well grow up and choose to take revenge on others when they have the capacity to. And so to avoid being knocked flat, it's a good idea to respect little children when they're small. Miss Trunchbull joins the class, and after checking that there's no nude or slimy things in her jug of water, starts terrorizing the children, making sure that they've learned something decent. Now, the first thing that Miss Honey told them that she would probably test them on is the 3 times table. And the way that Miss Trunchbull asks the students is just set up in a way for them to fail. So she asked them to recite the 3 times table backwards. And of course, her attitude is both insulting and aggressive. And it shows her, as we have grown to know her, a person who's interested in power and not in educating children. And it's also her being a bully, setting up the kids to fail so that she can obviously have an excuse to harass them further. And it is obviously an indicator of how morally backwards she is. Let me read the passage from the book. Wilfred is the student who's been chosen. Recite the 3 times table backwards, the Trunchbull barked. Backwards, stammered Wilfred. But I haven't learnt it backwards. There you are, cried the Trunchbull, triumphant. She's taught you nothing. Miss Honey, why have you taught them absolutely nothing at all in the last week? That is not true, headmistress, Miss Honey said. They have all learnt their 3 times table, but I see no point in teaching it to them backwards. There's little point in teaching anything backwards. The whole object of life, headmistress, is to go forwards. I venture to ask whether even you, for example, can spell a single word like wrong backwards straight away. I very much doubt it. Miss Honey here actually defends Wilson, which is quite surprising given how we've seen her. And it suggests that she is becoming more confident, and maybe that having spoken to Matilda about what she went through with Miss Trunchbull is actually helping her in some form. Also, she points out that the idea of learning to recite something like a 3 times table backwards is pretty useless and more of a party trick, which points out Miss Trunchbull is really just trying to set them up. Now, Wilson's inquisition, let's call it, is with Miss Trunchbull is getting worse and worse. However, he's in a very, very difficult spot. Why? This is because he knows that the Trunchbull is trying to set him up and wants him to fail. However, he also knows that he can't get out of this without getting Miss Trunchbull the correct answer. So his health and safety literally depend on getting the answer correct. Now, also, he knows how badly he needs to get it right because Miss Honey and his parents and pretty much nobody is able to defend him against Miss Trunchbull, and that puts Miss Trunchbull as the all-powerful in this instance. Now, we can also, again, make the comparison to Miss Honey and how, although she is maybe not all physically powerful at all, and she has not tried to overpower everyone, but she is gaining her own power through her moral superiority. And this is how she has gained Matilda's support and motivated Matilda to such an extent that Matilda is willing to fight for her. As the interrogation continues, however, it is interrupted because writing starts appearing onto the blackboard. And this is where we have the third miracle, and where Matilda is able to control the chalk, and there is the whole Agatha, give my Jenny back her home incident. So it is clear to us what Matilda has been working on with the cigar at home, and she has basically been trying to use her power to learn how to control an object such as chalk in order to write. And this very much makes literal the idea that recognizing injustice gives someone the power to change things in their world. So the chalk has done its job, and Agatha has been exposed. I'm going to read the passage we were looking at now. Wilfred, who had managed to resume his seat in the front row, screamed, "Miss Trunchbull has fallen down! Miss Trunchbull is on the floor!" This was the most sensational bit of news of all, and the entire class jumped up out of their seats to have a really good look. And there she was, the huge figure of the headmistress, stretched full length on her back across the floor, out for the count. Miss Trunchbull is out. And of course, this little fainting spell, as it turns out to be, put her in the ultimate vulnerable position. She has been crushed by Matilda's little magic stunt, which has frightened the wit out of her. And Nigel is happily able to gain some power over her and throws a jug of water over her head. This shows, at least in the short term, that Matilda has been successful at shifting the power balance in the school. Miss Honey knew all along that this was Matilda. She noticed it while the chalk was moving. And we have a brief description of Matilda feeling curiously elated. Curiously elated means ecstatically happy. That means beyond happy, almost euphoric, if you want. It's this passage which we're going to look at is quite fun. The matron is being called for, and she appears with 5 other teachers to take control of the situation, given that Miss Trunchbull has fainted. I'm going to read the passage from the book. "By golly, somebody's floored her at last," cried one of the men, grinning. "Congratulations, Miss Honey." "Who threw the water over her?" asked the matron. "I did," said Nigel proudly. "Good for you," another teacher said. "Shall we get some more?" "Stop that," the matron said. "We must carry her up to the sick room." It took all 5 teachers and the matron to lift the enormous woman and stagger with her out of the room. This is quite a hilarious reaction to Miss Trunchbull fainting. You'd expect colleagues to be quite concerned about her feeling ill and passing out. Instead, they congratulate Miss Honey, and they also suggest throwing more water on her while she is down on the floor. This humanizes the teachers and the other adults in Cruncham Hall, and it makes the reader see that they were probably under some form of a spell, full of fear for Miss Trunchbull, and therefore Matilda, in doing what she did, has potentially been able to save both the students at Cruncham Hall and Miss Honey from Miss and all of the teachers from Miss Trunchbull's abuse. On top of that, the cherry on the cake is that she has also exposed Miss Trunchbull's theft and meanness, and this chips away at Miss Trunchbull's credibility and authority in the community at large.